Welcome to BST. I'm here with Te Ao, and our guest for this episode is Julius Kuresa. Mālole soifua, lawa whionga, a whio mai. Welcome, Jules.
Malo ni tarofa, kia orana. Thanks for having me on, boys. It's a privilege to be speaking with you guys after watching all the episodes last year. So I'm quite honoured to be asked to be on your platform. Thank you.
Great to have you with us, Jules, and a lot to sort of cover. But you sort of the last month, 3 weeks ago with Cyclone Alfred, you're sort of recovering from that. What was that experience like with you being on the Gold Coast?
Yeah, it was, definitely nothing that we've experienced in New Zealand. Being over here in the last 16 years, I think we've had two major events like that. Obviously, Cyclone Alfred, and a couple of years ago on Christmas, we had that tornado that came through. It's just amazing to see Mother Nature and the force, that the nature has that you can't control and be at the mercy of. Yeah, we came through that. The interesting thing, boys, is for me personally, when those events have happened, it's seeing the reaction of people when there is a bit of panic and where there's fear. And it's sort of, for me, it's like, wow, it's a lot for a lot of people. Humanity just goes out the window, if that makes sense. Like everyone's just, which makes sense. Everyone's out for their own, hey, I've got to make sure I've got enough water, or, forget about the guy that's behind me. I'm going to take the 8 pallets of water that's here, things like that I was seeing. It was amazing. It was, but that Christmas storm a couple of years ago really helped us prepare for this cyclone. So we were, we had our gas oven. We already managed to get some water and lighting, and so yeah, we were pretty much prepared. Although we did, go out, without power for a couple of days. But other than that, we're very fortunate to come through without too much damage.
Yeah, like, is it something you have to factor in now every cyclone season with those sort of weather events, and being without power for a couple of days and that as well? How does that sort of work in the neighbourhood?
Yeah, I think that everyone's prepared now. Like even the government, the local council, there are measures that have been taken to make sure that whatever it's they'll minimise through some practices or things that they've put in place. Like, for example, with the power a couple of years ago, man, being without power for 7 days or 8 days, I think it was, it just, you really appreciate the little things, because obviously without the power, there's no hot water. You couldn't turn on the stove. Obviously, there was no entertainment, and not just the power, but the phones were off as well, especially around our area. So those sorts of things. It's, for me, it centered me. It brought me back down to reality. Like these things can go at any time. You just got to make sure that you've got some things in place, a plan, where you're able to survive these sorts of things, without too much trouble. So I think everyone's learned. But you're right, though. I think these things are becoming more common. So I'm expecting at the same time next year there'll be another storm off the coast that'll come in and wreak some havoc.
Yeah. Look, how do you stay connected as well? I think, in terms of power, charging phones and all that kind of thing.
So, we got the cars, with the phones, we're able to go down and charge the car, charge the phone in the car. And like this time around, the connection wasn't that bad. We still had on the phones. It wasn't like it was cut the last time, like the last one. But it was good, man. It was, but like I said earlier, these sorts of things just make you realise how life can just change, and if you're not prepared, when everything's cut off, everything that you've become accustomed to, where the conveniences are cut off, yeah, can be scary.
Hey, my father once said to me when we had a power cut, he was going, look, I grew up in Samoa without power, without, in some instances, running water. He goes, if this happens here, he goes, sorry, son, I think you're gone. I can survive. and I think, you know,
That's so true, though. Eh?
oh, I was very Western kid. But Jules, look, great. In terms of having you on, we're going to cover a few things around that. I'm glad everyone was safe in terms of the event that you had. But we know from, you know, yourself, very Poirua proud. You know, take us back in terms of just, you know, being from Poirua background. What's your experiences in terms of growing up here?
Well, I mean, it's you know that saying, you can take the boy out of Poirua, but you know you can't take the Poirua out of the boy. You know, I think that rings so true. A lot of what I've learnt in my time in Porirua, like with community service, they're the things that have held me in good stead, you know, in all my career moves and in my shift over here. You know, being brought up in the culture, the Samoan culture, Polynesian culture, learning about respect and you know, I think career-wise, it's always been through service. So my upbringing in Porirua has really had a big or profound effect on my life, not just in my career, but in my coaching, in my mentoring, in my programs that I run. Yeah, it's like I go back home now and there's a nostalgic, you know, when I drive past certain landmarks. I know things have changed now. People are different. Everyone's growing up. My generation, you know, there's a new generation that's come through, and they're building their own memories of what Porirua is about.
Yeah.
But I'll still have, you know, great memories and great lessons that I've learned. That's, like I said earlier, that's really held me in good stead.
Yeah. You're part of a group of brothers who sort of involved in the game of rugby league in Porirua in that sort of time. What sort of drew you to the game?
I'll be honest, Shane, we started pretty late. So we were brought up in a pretty strict Christian house, a 7-day Adventist. So we had no sports on Saturday. So we missed out. I missed out all that age group because we were going to church on Saturday. So it wasn't got into my teenage years that I'll sneak away, you know, take off from church and try and scab game here and there. And, you know, to get that feeling, because you know, you go to score some game we played against, and I'm like, you know, I'm missing out on that. So I'll sneak out, you know, throughout the year. And it wasn't until I got a bit older, I wouldn't say I broke the cycle, but, you know, I rebelled against you know, the upbringing that, you know, through the Christian or the Seventh-day Adventist church. And that's when I started playing. I started playing pretty late compared to most. But in doing so, that paved the way for my younger brothers to be able to experience a bit of that junior football.
Yeah, well, you know, from an early stage, Jules, it definitely sort of stood out as a bit of a leader in that as well. What were some of those experiences as a player that sort of led you to make that transition into coaching?
Well, it was all by accident, to be honest, Shane. We were at Parramatta Raiders one year. We had a pretty good couple of years there where we won the senior first comp. Paul Griffith was our coach, I think, for '94. And I coached the under-19s the year before. You know, I just took the reins to help the boys out. In '94, we were getting ready for the season. And I remember vividly Paul Griffiths turning up to training as our season was starting. Goes, well, I'm leaving. I'm going to go and play for the Wellington Dukes. It's a rugby league decisions. That decision, it's up to you what you do. And then he just walked off. And I remember I was with, yeah, I mean, I was with, you know, I don't know to how, you know, Dennis Ngalo, Ita Manaima,
all the boys.
all those young cats were, Yeah, so I took the reins that year. So those first couple of years, I knew nothing about. I played alongside Griffith, and a few other Warren,
Doherty.
Dallas, who went on to
Oh, yeah.
and. So I didn't really know the X's and O's as far as I think my gift at that time was bringing people together, trying to get a common goal to do something. And so we got to the grand final that year, lost to Kapiti, but yeah, it was purely by accident. Paul Griffith came. He's a legend. You've got a lot of respect for him, and he left to play Bartercard or whatever it was. So I thought, man, I can't leave these boys. So
Wow.
yeah, and that's how the coaching stuff. It's
Hey, I guess the heart, because those boys, man, even your younger brother, Cass played with you guys as well, eh? Your brother?
yeah.
Your other brother Brutus, did he play as well with the
Yep.
rest of them?
Brutus was in and out. So Brutus was
Yeah.
he was the hit, and he'll just come in and make
He's a
a
hitman.
hits. He played with us. It's but that was a good thing about playing footy back in those days. It's when you talk about playing with your friends, the camaraderie that you build with your mates that you've played through. I know with you, Tahoe, it's St. George, or both of you. You played with some of your brothers there from age group right up to A grade and beyond. And which is something I feel is missing in our game at the moment. We don't have that that history where players have come through all the way. They've built that camaraderie. They've built that brotherhood. Like I think it was back in those days, and it certainly was for us at the Parramatta Raiders. It was. I sort of turned it into an us and them sort of thing, and uh,
My question was, bro, sorry, that because someone said that is this true that you guys were contracted, you guys were paid? Is that right? Or was that just a rumor?
so
No,
1992, we were
I'm
senior
saying,
first. Yeah, senior first, 1992. I think we were the only team that was getting paid. But hey, it was $20 a game.
hey, that's something, man.
20
At
a
least
game.
I mean, hey,
$20 goes a long way in 1992,
it does, man. It
Oh,
sure does.
and
brother.
it does now.
And then if you remember, Parramatta Raiders were
Yeah,
the only club that had a bus, right?
yeah,
Yes,
that's
So
right.
we're going,
Yeah,
yeah. So we'll travel to games, and when it was payday, we get paid every fortnight. Everyone had $40 to spend on whatever it was. Man, we would buy a keg. Like if we played in Wainui or Ramwick, I think it's about an hour drive. It'll take us about 3 hours to get back. We'd have a keg in the back of the bus there and just having a good time with the boys.
now, Jules, one of the things that was sort of that sticks out of that period is one, Parramatta was a new club in the competition. You were right there at sort of near its inception, and also taking the club through to play in the Premier grade. What was that sort of? I mean, one as a new coach, but then what was that sort of experience like from a club perspective? But then also in terms of your own development as a coach.
Yeah, it was a big step because, like I said, 94, when Griffiths left, we were playing reserve grade. We made the grand final. Then 95, we stepped into that A grade or Premier level. Um, and I think I learned early then that you needed good players or to have a pretty good roster to compete. So before the season started in 95, I had approached, and I'm sure, like I had approached our few tour Love.
Mm.
Do you remember Tor Love, who went on to play Warrington?
okay.
Two of the probably they played for St. George, under 19s, I think it
I think
was.
you
So it's
mentioned that.
up and coming centers.
Yeah,
They came and Mike Luke came and played for us, and I still hadn't developed as a coach as far as X's and O's. I relied heavily on leadership and just trying to put a common goal to a team. I think it was more motivation for me. It was more motivational, trying to empower players to be, you know, I felt sorry for, when I think back, I feel sorry for the teams that I coached because it was, compared to what I learned later on in the down the track, I'm like, man, I'm surprised we even won games or were competitive. But it said a lot about the players that we had on the roster at the time.
Look, you say, like, you talk about sort of developing as a coach over that time. What was your sort of approach as a people person to bringing that sort of team together? At that particular time.
I probably didn't realize that at the time, but I think my man management skills were probably, I didn't know it as man management.
Yeah.
I was able to get on with players and use certain words to empower or, to inspire players to run harder, tackle harder, those sorts of things. And I think, like, a lot of those things I didn't realize at the time. I probably had pretty good communication skills as far as trying to get the best out of players. Yeah. But in saying that, I think in those early years, the line was also blurred as far as coaching and friend, because a lot of those players that I was coaching were my teammates and my friends. So I didn't understand the importance of having that line. The coach, friendship, player, which I learned later on down the track. It's all good to be friendly with your players, but there's also a time where, it's you're the coach and the other player, and I think that's an important distinction if you want to do really well in coaching.
Yeah. So eventually you moved into sort of North City and the Vikings, Poirua, and probably during one of the club's most successful sort of period that it's had in its sort of history. 4 titles. There was a number of grand finals outside that in that period as well. Obviously, Parramatta provided a bit of that base of learning. What was, do you feel, was the point of difference in terms of when you're at North City in making that transition from Parramatta?
Yeah, like before I got to North City, to Poirua, I was down in Dunedin 5 years. I moved down there, and I there was a few years playing footy down in Dunedin. I actually made the Otago Root team while I was down.
Yes.
And ended up coaching down there, and that's where where my education as a coach really excelled. There are a couple of good coaches down there that played under Fitio at university. Grant Leone, who was the only one of 2 level 3 coaches in New Zealand at the time. He was the Otago Rep coach. And when I was coaching and I ended up coaching the Otago Rep team as well when I was down there. What changed for me was Bluey McLennan. He was a Kiwi coach at the time. He did a clinic down in Dunedin. I think it was 2006 or 2007. And I had a bit of time with him. I picked his brain, and for me it was like, this guy had never played rep football, but he was coaching the Kiwis. So it was interesting to me, like, how could you? And he told me stories about, it was really hard for him to be in that space where he was telling these NRL players, international players, what to do. And he enlightened me on some of the ways that he was able to work through that and to empower his players. So I learned a lot from that little meeting I had with him, and he sent me some information. He sent me his playbook that he used for Albert when they won the national championship, I think, a couple of years before, what adopted and used. And just, I started learning about the X's and O's, like you know, when coaches say, "Oh, you got to build pressure." At the time, I'm like, what do you mean by build pressure? It's all complete your sets, kick into the corners and kick chase and just group that. So, and it was, so when I came back to Porirua, I had coached a team down there that we won the championship in 2006. And I had coached the Otago rep team. So coming back to Porirua to take on, that coaching role, I found I was in a good space to be able to, because let's face it, that Vikings team, man, you look at the players they had in there: Frankie Ramika, Zach Walsh, you had Greg, you had Anton, the legends of that club, and they were probably in their prime. But when I got there, they had lost the grand final in 2006. They got knocked out of the semi-finals by Wainui the year before. Still had a good, strong roster, but there was something missing, and it was just someone to be able to manage, that group there. So, in coming to the Porirua Vikings, I saw that as my role. One of the things that Lloyd taught me was the most important thing in the game are the players. And it's your job to make sure that not only are they in an environment you can develop, but you can also learn from them. So coming into, you had all that experience, very much. Frank Ramika, very smart. Zach Walsh, very clever player. So, it was good. I came that year. I had seen their games the year before, and I thought that they were missing some pieces. So during the off season, I had approached a couple of players. Hemi Kemp was one of them. He was at St. George, the hooker. Nene, young Nene, he was playing tag. He was a rugby player. And Jamie McDonald, who also played for the Vikings a few years back, and I knew him from the Raiders. Astute halfback. I thought that Anton, as good as he was, needed a steady hand on the other side, and Jamie brought that. So just to add some pieces there with what they had, and it worked out really well. We beat Wainui in that final, and then the following year added a few more pieces, and we beat Wainui again in that final before I headed over to Australia. But it was at the end of the day, like, I still had the decisions of who to play and who to drop. But for me, it was an open book. I listened to the players and what they had. I respected their experience and what they had to offer to be able to, make us a better team. We had some good young players. Matty Robertson was that first year I was there. He went off to the Warriors, played in the under-20s, ended up at Penrith. He's now on the Gold Coast. I caught up with him. Good kid. Laz Mulu was a young guy, my nephew. I brought over, 18 years old, and he ended up down at Storm, obviously with the Bulldogs, and so we had a pretty good roster, and had a great time. It was good to have a chip. It was and that was and part of the name change. I was really changed.
Yep. So Jules, as a strategist and pulling a team together, recruitment's all part of it. How did you, with sort of people coming in over that period to enhance the team, how did you sort of maintain and develop the culture?
That's a good question. I didn't want to like that culture with the Vikings. They already had a pretty good culture there. The players had a lot to say as far as how things were done, and I really didn't want to disrupt it. I just added my piece into what I thought could work. So there was some selection changes that I'd made which didn't go down too well. with some of the senior players. But in the end, it came around because for me, I was looking to the future as far as developing. Like, we're going to put these players, and as well as I'm going to reward the players that you're owning. For me, I don't care if you hit of you. And there was a selection in the grand final, and the first grand final we had, where Greg Dean, who was the Wellington fullback, Wellington centre, was coming back from an injury, and I felt he wasn't. Hey, no disrespect, Greg. I love Greg, but that year I picked young Tere Akavi ahead of him, and Tere wasn't, not the player that Greg was, but he turned up to every training, very solid. And in the grand final, he held his own. He was a very, added to our team winning that game.
Yeah. Look, how in terms of, like, you're the coach, you sort of head the team in that, how important, what is it to have sort of a good support management team around you, and sort of how did sort of that work in terms of the support that they provided to you?
I think it's important. I think going in as a coach, you have to have a great team around you, a great management team. So lucky for me, we had Libby. Wasn't my first choice as a manager. She was just there, but I got to know her really well. We developed what I needed, and she was really good. She understood and did things that was required for us to. I didn't have to worry about any of that admin stuff or any of, hey, is that player, has he been cleared, or da 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 da. It's all been done, and having the backing of the club at the time, Michelle Robinson, I think, was the chairman. Bernie Woods was there, and they were really supportive of me and what we were trying to achieve as a club.
It sounds good like that. It sounds like, the people that are around you are really important, and particularly in the governance and driving the club, stability in that as well. So it sounds like that's probably, attributable off sort of that great successful period, was just all of those pieces seem to fall together for you.
Yeah, exactly, man. It's like you said. I think the Vikings made the 204 grand final. Oh no, they lost, I think, in the finals. They came back and won. They're undefeated in 205.
Yeah.
Lost the grand final 206. Knocked out in the semis in 206. So throughout the 2000s, they were probably the form team, and a couple of occasions there, Wainui were the nemesis, but we were able to turn that around for a few years there when we got there, and there was the additions as well, and new vision. So,
yeah.
And you're right.
Look,
things like that don't happen by accident. Like, obviously Bernie Woods had done a lot of work in the background to set things up. The vision that we had for the club had to have a buy-in from the players, and they were, senior players, experienced players who all wanted to win and wanted to make sure that they did what we needed to do to win in that period.
Yeah. So look, I know there's a link in terms of the talking about, the move to Australia through rugby league and that as well. But I was also keen not to underestimate sort of your professional career at the same time, running parallel in New Zealand. You did a lot of work and worked in the disability sector in terms of workmates and that as well. Was it the professional career that helped the coaching, or the coaching that helped the professional career?
Good question. That's a good question. I'll have to say they just work hand in hand, to be totally honest. I just found myself in a career where it was about service, and I found myself, like, all my roles in community has all became case management roles. So you had a caseload of people that you're helping to get from A to B, like to link in with services, and to somehow empower them to make some changes in their lives. And for me, that's exactly what coaching is. So in my career in disability or in the community of homeless youth, I saw myself as a coach rather than a worker. Like I'm coaching these young people how to, how to build their tools to be able to deal with what they're going through in life. And it's been a great journey for me, to be honest. When I think of rugby league, I just love the game for what it's taught me. I love the game for the experiences that I've had in Porirua. I've been taking the field against you, Shane, a couple of times, but it was always love after. But and I know, and those experiences, when you're talking about resilience, you learn that in the game of football. You're setting goals, you learn that in the game of rugby league. Dealing with adversity, you learn that in the game. The tools that you learn in the game of rugby league is transferable to life. In order for you to be successful in rugby league, you've got to be fit. You've got to do the 1%, and it's the same thing in life. You got to do the 1% in life.
Yeah. Hey, Jules, don't forget me, you and Jerome also worked on the Wellington Samoan stuff in the late back end of the 90s. And again, that pretty much is a real highlight for me in terms of just my involvement with rugby league was the work we did there. One, organising community, but then also generating an interest in terms of Samoan-born players, Samoan heritage players to do that. I know, again, we'll probably talk a little bit more this down the track of this conversation around your work in the Gold Coast and Queensland, but what rep football, club football, what's that point of difference of that you sort of perceived from the development of the Wellington Samoans? And we were sort of coming in as a bit of stewardship off the back of some other legacy work from Peter Nalumalimana and Ken, but during that time I know that was a special thing for us. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it was special to be a part of that. Obviously we've all got our cultural roots, and with us being heavily involved in football, we want to be involved in something that promotes our culture or our players to a pathway to not just represent our people within that area, but to hopefully have a pathway to higher level of football. It was just amazing, and I know I don't know whether Tal you would have played for the Tokelau team, and how important that how a lot of pride involved in representing your people. I think for us it was a special a highlight for me, being involved in anything Samoan, rugby league, and bringing the players together. And a lot of time, players that I admired who played for other clubs, and having the opportunity to be together as a team for me was just a great feeling to have these players that came in. There was no, you left your patch at the door, meaning your uniform. It was, once you walked in the door, it was Samoa, and it was just like any cultural team. There's a lot of laughter, the hyena laughs, the jokes, and and that special time for me, being involved with you, Shane, and Jerome, involved Ken Laban, the back end stuff and getting that up and running, turning it into an incorporated society so we can apply for funding, organising games, all that stuff that needs to be done in the background. That was, for me, that was the first time I'd been involved in an administration role, and I saw how important it is to have that, in order for our players to have those opportunities.
A lot of Sunday meetings at McDonald's, I recall. For that. Hey, before we jump into this move to Australia, I noticed on your LinkedIn where it said that you worked for Work and Income, you said your position was slave for 7 years. This is another question, Jules. So was it the system or the role that was the slave? What was it?
Oh my God.
Jules,
I can't believe I put that up, man. I'll have to go and check that out. Oh,
You better
Oh.
change it.
Jane, before we move on, bro, I still just wanted to hear your, because you worked with disability
yeah.
in the community. Are you still doing that, or are you still involved with that, with the disability?
Yeah, I'm still involved with disability. So I run a support work business. So I've got a team of support workers that we run programs. So I still do work in the community, like youth programs, men's programs. So we're primarily a mentoring organization that run programs within disability, within the men's space, within the youth space, if need be. Yeah, so still involved in that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jules, let's talk about that in terms of just your current sort of role as in Coach Fit. What's Coach Fit? Take us through that and that current role that you have.
Yeah. So Coach Fit is, I'll tell you, one of the clubs that I coached, A grade, went under in 2011. So the following year, I thought, man, what am I going to do? And my wife said, oh, can you train me? Do some training. So I said, okay. So I took her to the park. We did some training, and then my sisters drove past and said, oh, hey, can we join in? So then they joined with their kids, and then their friends wanted to do it. And then before you knew it, I was getting 40 to 50 people at our training sessions.
Wow.
So I said, I'm not coaching footy. I'm just going to do some boot camp training. And it's coaching fitness for life. And so breaking it down, Coach Fit for Life. So I kept that business name, like going into the community sector. It's still the same, like I'm still coaching fitness for life. It's still a mentoring program. I'm still coaching. If I'm working with young people, we've done some work at the juvie. It's, empowering young people to make good decisions. And I know it's quite tough when they're in that, it's because they're going to hang out with their mates when they come out. So it's hard. But if you can plant a seed, you never know. 2-3 years down the track, then, oh shit, excuse my language.
No.
Something might, a penny might drop. And but yeah, we still do that. And is that the question, Shane? I can't remember.
Yeah, no, it's just
No.
Coach Fit. I think sort of Taho asked that question. I thought let's go down that particular thing. I think the work that you're doing and that. So it's sort of something that's sort of just regular, and you've got sort of a big sort of group involved.
Yeah, look,
What's the ages,
like
Jules?
Coach
What's that
Fit,
age range?
so Coach Fit was initially the boot camp stuff. So when I went into business about 6 years ago, to run those programs as an independent, I didn't want to go through the, getting a whole new name, setting up. So I just used that same boot camp business, because I thought it was just relative, everything relative. But the boot camp stuff, that was for me life-changing, as far as like I'm still a coach, like coaching fitness to a group of people that I probably ordinarily associate with, because it got to the stage where the group was predominantly uh, English expats, and we forged great relationships. It was such a great, we traveled around Australia entering these, those obstacle races like Tough Mudder, Stampede. Yeah. So for me, like, how do I get motivation for these people to train? And, so we train for an event. Hey, there's a Tough Mudder coming up in about 3 months. Man, people trained, they worked hard, they lost weight, or and that was the driver. We pinpointed an event and we trained for it. And it was such a great, for me, because I wasn't coaching football, that was like football to me. Like we were a team training for this event and traveling to Melbourne, went to Sydney, and just local events. and then we went into running. There was a period there for a couple of years where we were doing 10K runs, half marathons, and then we did the marathon. And then so how can we hey, let's go to China and run the Chinese wall marathon.
So I saw the photo of you on the wall. Yeah. How was that as an experience in terms of
it was
the wall?
Well, I'm a history buff. I love history, and I did my homework before I went over. The amount of time that the wall was built, different dynasties that took over and built an extension to the wall.
Yeah.
The loss of life, and then when you go up and you see it stretch into the horizon, in the hills, it's just wow, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's,
Jules, where were you? Were you north of Beijing? Were you at the part of the wall in Beijing? Whereabouts were you when you were
in Beijing?
Wow.
Yeah, in Beijing, and part of the run, we had a village that was, I think, thousands of years old. A village that had been there for. So we actually ran through, and the people were there, clapping and whatnot, and man, it was just it was funny, man, because I was the only. Obviously, a lot of the people that go over are white people that go over to run. So I was running through this Chinese village. They were all laughing. They were not laughing at me. They were looking at me, going, "Whoa, big!" And there was they're all laughing, but yeah, it was a great experience, man. To go over with the team, to be able to do that, it was, and for those people, I'm still very, very good friends. We still catch up. Walk and then coffee, and you still had that relationship with some of those people. It's been great.
and in that role, is there points of different or new stuff that you've sort of learned working with sort of different groups like that, particularly like outside the football sort of area?
How do you mean, Shane?
Oh, just in terms of health and well-being, motivation, is there some of the in having sort of a different sort of group to sort of work with and applying sort of coaching, mentoring, is there any sort of new stuff you learn in observing people?
Yeah, it's a good question, because like, although the ethnicities and the group are different as far as their background, it's all very similar as far as what everyone wants to achieve. Like, everyone wants to be healthier. And I found with my coaching experience, being able to empower people to do stuff like, hey, we're going to meet down here at 6 o'clock. We're going to go for a run. We need to get down there if we want to build toward. Man, they're down there. They're ready to go. It was such a good experience to be able to see. And man, there was a lady that trained with us. She dropped like 90 Ks, the 2 years that she was with us. And yeah, she came to China with us, Wall, and but I'll talk about her after, because there are certain things about that sort of training. Because when you're training hard and this is the thing with wealth, and we'll get into like fitness and health, is that as great as that was, as the achievements in going to these places and doing those things and seeing them drop weight, they work really hard. But here's the thing that I learned, is that for longevity, you've got to do things that are sustainable. So the amount, what we're doing to train for those events, you couldn't sustain that. You couldn't, eat at a restricted diet. We had a deficit constantly to lose body fat, and then running. On top of that, training, the group training. You couldn't sustain that as an ordinary, the average everyday person. And the lady I told you that had lost 94 Ks, forward now, 8 years, has put it back on and some. Because, and this is what with health and wellness and all that sort of stuff. I don't prescribe those 8 weeks. Get in there, bang, bang, bang. Like at our age, it's about the long game, and it's about doing something that you can sustain today, tomorrow, 10 years, 20 years down the track. And sorry to go off cue there.
No.
No, not off cue at all. I think this is really good in terms of where, some of the conversation in Talanoa is around that. So, definitely sustainable. You do hit a good point. There's stuff that motivate people right in the here and now. There's it's sort of like a start and a finish, and then it sort of ends. And like you say, you put it back on, and that yo-yo where people sort of yo-yo. Sustainable. What would sustainable look like? And particularly, when we are talking around health and being in the community and sort of where we are and stuff like that. What should sustainable look like for people?
Okay, so my main focus now, I'm 2 years away from 60, Shane, and it's like I sometimes think, where has that time gone? Like that we're talking about 60, and then 5 years retirement, So my focus as far as sustainable is people my age and above.
Yeah.
So sustainability is not going on any crazy diets. So at 58, my focus is to maintain my muscle mass, strengthen the muscle mass I have. If I can gain some muscle mass, awesome.
Yeah.
And to do resistance training, cardio, walk, on a treadmill, incline if need be. But that's it. As far as nutrition, the focus that, if I'm talking to someone that's over 50 or over 45, nutrition, your focus should be on protein, okay? Because protein helps build muscles, okay? And it'll be cutting out sugar, or minimizing sugar intake. So I'm not talking about sugar that you put into your coffee. I'm talking about sugar that is in your everyday food.
In the foods, yeah.
Like if you think about bread, the
Sweet tooth,
the bakery stuff that that we and like just limit that intake and focus on whole foods. I eat a lot of eggs, and I'm doing a lot of experimental stuff for myself, fasting, 1 meal a day, that sort of stuff, and to see how my body adapts but yeah, as far as sustainability is, is what you shouldn't be eating, and what you should be eating. It's not rocket science.
Hey.
It's not rocket science, man.
So custard squares ain't protein.
Well, you're probably your dear wife will be keeping you accountable and yourself, or keeping each other accountable to eating well.
Yeah, man. It's like for me during the week, like I fast 5 days a week.
Wow.
And then in the weekend, because I have time with my wife, we like to go to a cafe and have a breakfast, and then I'll have that's when I'll have a piece of bread.
Yeah.
Or like a toast. Yeah. But during the week, I try to be very strict to get that discipline. So for the last 5 weeks, I've been like 4 hours. 3 days, I'll eat 1 meal a day. But that 1 meal a day would be 2 steaks, 10 eggs, a cup of sweet potatoes, and then that'll be it. Okay, so then 24 hours. Yeah, and yeah.
Jules, talk to us what the theory behind fasting in terms of what the benefits are.
Oh man, so fasting, for those that it's intermittent fasting. I think there's a model that everyone uses. I think it's 16 and 8, where you fast for 16 hours and you've got a eating window of 8. So fasting, what it does is it gives your body an opportunity to replenish itself, to heal itself, without having to work hard to digest constant eating. And it also promotes growth hormones, inside your body. Very, really, really good to, when I was younger, say in my 30s and 40s, if I'd fast 20 hours for a week or two, oh man, the weight would just, it's not so much now. Obviously I'm 50, 57, 58. For me, I use that as an opportunity for the body to be able to just nourish itself, replenish, to heal. And people don't understand how much strain your body to digest. When you're constantly eating, your body's working hard to digest that. And as you're getting older, your metabolism slows down, right? So metabolism is your body's process of breaking down food into energy. When that slows down, well, there's nowhere to go, but the body then stores that as fat.
Yeah.
So what fasting does is, it's great. And I've done a 48, I've done a 72-hour fast.
Wow.
Just a experimental, like the body reacts, and it's amazing what the body can do. You can fast for a very long time without food. And I don't know. I think I'm not saying for everyone to do it. That's just what I do.
Yeah. Now you're able to intake water and all that during that period. It's more just fasting on food, hard solids.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there is. I did a dry fast, a 48 dry fast the last year, sometime in last year, where there was no liquids at all. That, for me personally, that was pretty tough.
Yeah.
Because I was still training. So like but yeah, but the normal fast, I still like drink water. I'll have a black coffee.
Yeah.
If I need to. But yeah, that's I'd encourage anyone or everyone to try it out, see how they feel, do some research on it, and yeah.
I just want to say that, bro, instead of you saying 58, you look like 48. You look good for your age, bro. Come around here.
It's the lighting.
Jules, we're getting yourself, Andre Whitaker on, and all of you guys look fantastic in terms of where you are in your life. So it's a good lesson for us all. I think fasting also is good in terms of I found it's useful in terms of inflammation in the joints and that, particularly, where
Inflammation. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that really helps. And like you say, the body sort of can concentrate on some of these other areas as opposed to trying to sort of digest food, if you're overeating in that.
Yeah, and yeah, like the foods we eat, especially Polynesians, like inflammation is huge. Like it's so serious. It's so bad for our people that we've got those things, the joints, and it's the carb diet that we have. It's the pastries, the white bread. It's in New Zealand we sandwich everything, right? Like it's not uncommon to go down and use a loaf of bread on a plate there to eat with whatever you've got, and yeah, it's you don't realize how bad bread is. When you're consuming a whole lot.
Yeah. No, definitely. Look, I know that it's sort of one of those areas that, just in us talking before this episode is around sort of Polynesian health and that as well. I've sort of had a look at the statistics in terms of the diaspora in Australia from the census. So basically the Pacific population in New Zealand's 380, in Australia it's now 337. So pretty much sort of very, very similar. And one of the interesting things in terms of that sort of breakdown was trying to get Pacific, which is different from New Zealand with Australia, is Pacific people are sort of lumped in with sort of multicultural sort of populations. So in terms of Australia, there's not really that visibility, particularly in health, sort of areas as well. And there actually is some concern around underreporting of Pacific people from Pacific backgrounds in the census as well, which means a lot of areas in terms of where you've got resources to support communities in that may not necessarily sort of reach because of that undercount in that as well. So just interesting around some of that. And a report that was out in 2021 talked about mental health as a big area for addressing in terms of or support to Pacific communities, and that particularly for Pacific background people aged under 40. Just keen in terms of, you know, the work that you do and sort of where that, you know, seeing some of those statistics, you know, your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Mental health, it's, you know, as clearly as what it should. You just have to go to church. You just have to go to some Pacific Island events, festivals, to see where are people at as far as more independence festivals over the years. And I'm like, and I don't, this is not to offend anyone, but our people are big, man. It starts from our kids. You know, our kids are starting to, you know, they're starting to be diagnosed with diabetes at such a young age. You know, because it's that heavy carb diet, and it's not just that; it's the portions. If you see the amount that our kids are eating, it's and that are things that, you know, it's because I don't know whether you saw this, Shane, but you know, if you look at the most obese countries in the world, the top 10 are made up of Pacific Island nations. And, you know, go beneath that stat, we also lead the stats in diabetes too, heart disease, high blood pressure, all those conditions. And, you know, it's a touchy subject because we're almost in denial of that. It's almost like, oh, you know, but we're seeing our people die younger and younger, you know, like in the last year, you know, guys in the 50s that I went to school with have passed, you know. And yeah, I don't know the full details, but I do know that if there were some changes in the way that they live their life, maybe, you know, they'll still be here. Because all those conditions I mentioned, the osteoporosis, the joint problems, metabolic syndrome, cognitive decline, and mental health, you know, a lot of these problems are brought on by some factors, and there's two common factors that we have control of. That is inactivity and bad eating choices.
Yeah.
So those two things, you can reverse those conditions. Looking at is but you know, it's getting that message out to the Polynesian or Pacific Island communities. It's really tough, man, because it's got to be, you know, I thought to address it, you go through the church. The church leaders be able to maybe, you know, filter out messages. And the problem with that is the church leaders are probably the worst culprits because they're being served by the people. You know, a lot of them are not in the best place as far as their health. And but you know, I see some young Polynesian guys, influencers on social media that are trying to make changes. You know, that you know, have got a big following. They're all about training. They're all about eating well. So hopefully, the more of those guys get on board, they can change the narrative for the younger generation.
Yeah, look, it's been an area of interest for us and the people that we've talked to over the duration of sort of the pod is around post footy sort of players and how they approach that period where they're not playing anymore, and how do you keep sort of active. And you know, that sometimes we've found just in conversations, some of it's physical, some of it's emotional in terms of that. Some of it goes back to sort of other features that are around sort of general mental health and that as well. I know there's not sort of one sort of reasoning, but we seem to always sort of end up in the same sort of position around those health statistics. And so it is a bit of a worry.
It is a bit of a worry, and I'll just touch on. I didn't answer what you asked about the mental health stuff, and if you look at suicide rates, just over the last 12 months here in Australia, you're still high Polynesian, succumbing to, taking their lives, and young men that have had the awareness and the supports around them, but it's still, there's still a stigma with men communicating their feelings, and I work with some men, and a lot of men don't like going to counselling. It's a tough thing to be able to sit in front of a stranger and bring out all these like the traumas that they might have had. It's so what I suggest though is, when you're before, if that's not an option for you at this point in time, is to get together with close friends. Like for me, a coffee catch up. When I catch up with coffee with some of the brothers here, it's therapy. Like where it's not crap talk. It's always asking about, hey, it's and not that people will be open to disclose what they're going through, but it's building that for me, and building a trust or an opportunity where maybe down the track you may be open to saying, hey, I do need some help, and like I said, not everyone is prescribed to going to counselling and doing that stuff, but where else then do you get that support? Sometimes it's as easy as catching up for coffee.
Yeah, and just that connection, which is
Connection.
really, really important in terms of people in isolation, or can be much more vulnerable than sort of if you've got connection and you feel there is a support network around you, because people feel how they feel. There's nothing you can't sort of gaslight people or tell them you're not feeling that or you should do this. I think everyone's experience is their own, so it's more that there is that network around them that if they do reach out, it's there and they're not sort of alone.
Yeah, and so sometimes they might just need an ear.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the person to tell them to do. You're just there to listen. Sometimes a person just needs to unload and not have to hear anyone tell them, "Oh, you should do this," or just be there to support. And I think it's important. Don't try that counselling friend. Just if that person has come to you to talk, let them speak, and if they need some assistance or if they're asking for it, then, but don't. For me personally, I would say just be there to listen.
Yeah. So look, Jules, I think we've gone a bit deep dive here, and it's really good. I really appreciate you sort of being able to talk around a number of these particular things. And like you say, in some spaces, it's probably an uncomfortable conversation, but it's good in terms of just really that you're able to sort of talk to that with us about it. I think just looking in terms of the work that you've done in Australia, it's been a continuation of that sort of community work in that as well. And I think you can see that come through in terms of our Talanoa with your talking around that. What probably a question is, in terms of the work you did in New Zealand to Australia, what's the difference between the two communities in terms of working at that sort of grassroots sort of level?
Well, that's funny because I'm involved with the, I don't know whether you know, but I was involved with the Queensland Samoa Rugby League here. I was the first head coach for the men's team, I think 10 years ago, I think it was. So I coached them for a couple of years and then I left. good friend of mine, Matty Tui Samoa, who you might know, he was an Auckland rep back in the day, represented Tui Samoa. So he runs Rugby League Samoa Queensland. And now I'm involved with Gold Coast Samoa Rugby League, who have broken away from Queensland. It's caused a bit of a rift, and it's run by, well, obviously I become the president, but a group of men, Beetham, Licky Beetham, and a few other guys from Auckland who are based here on the Gold Coast. So it's funny being involved with them in the admin level. I sort of drew back on, my experiences in Wellington and how we got those things up and running. But really great group of men. Like two of them, they run rugby league clubs here on the Gold Coast, and like Vili Kilimete explained the ins and outs of running the financials, the sponsorships, so we've got two guys on our board that run clubs here on the Gold Coast, and astute businessmen in their own right. So really good support around them. And the reason why I got involved with them was it's not about rugby league anymore for me now. It's about community and Gold Coast Rugby League. Where my understanding, and it is consensus with the group, was to offer it, because the population on the Gold Coast, Samoans, has exploded in the last 10 years. When I got here, you didn't see too many Samoans on the Gold Coast. They're always up in Logan, up north a bit, but there's a big Samoan community down here now. And we've got that King Seeker Academy that's involved down here. So my involvement was more about tapping into these contacts that we had in community, so that our people can access job opportunities through Job Network, education and training through training collab, a few of the institutions here, the arts, obviously with the King's Academy, and for me, and even tapping into rugby union and netball, like having an umbrella over all things more here on the Gold Coast. I saw the Gold Coast Rugby League something that's bigger picture than the Queensland Samoa Rugby League. It was to give our people here on the Gold Coast opportunities. On everything that I mentioned.
I want to congratulate
unfortunately,
you. Sorry, bro. Sorry to cut you off, bro. I wanted to congratulate you for being the chairman for the Gold Coast of that environment, that specific thing you're talking about. The tournament, like there's a tournament going on there in October this year, and it has those, it has netball and also rugby league, so it's a big event.
Well, there's so many tournaments going on here, like everyone's putting up their own tournaments. The Tongans have got to organize their tournaments. And that was, getting involved in, silly, it's, and that's the problem. Like there's no governing body with all these different nations. So everyone's doing their own thing. And I said to the committee, I said, look, we'll go to tournaments that we get invited to, and we might go to tour, but I don't want to be involved in holding tournaments with other nations. I just think we just do our own thing. Our primary goal is to provide pathways for our kids. We've got pathways to the Titans and the Netball Titans, the NFL Academy here on the Gold Coast. We've got really good links with them. We were able to hold clinics there, and it's just, I looked at it for our people here on the Gold Coast. We can really buy into these opportunities where with the NFL Academy, they're offering scholarship to private school, because they're located on a private school here so they're offering, if young Polynesian kid that they feel can go to college in the States, they've got a scholarship through that private school. And private schools here, man, it's like, if they become a permanent alumni, in that school, and how prestigious that can be, Shane. It's and just having the opportunity to have that full education there, and And if they go to college in the States, awesome, open up their opportunities to maybe get into the NFL. Yeah, it's amazing, man. It's that was the reason why I joined this cohort, and they're great men, men like yourselves who have a passion for community, a passion for our people, and who want to see our people thrive. We're immigrants, Shane. So how our people migrate country to country, and we have to find ways. When we came to New Zealand, it was my uncles and my older generation that were establishing stuff for us to be able to flourish in New Zealand. And I find I'm so privileged to be in a position where I'm with these men that are building something that we can pass on to the generation. They can access these opportunities and make a really great life for themselves here in Australia, particularly Gold Coast. Yeah.
Look, I love the vision. I love the leadership, and particularly in terms of providing those sort of pathways, Jules. I mean, it definitely is keeping the ladder for that next group to sort of build their foundations on. So I just love that sort of vision. Be keen to know how sort of things sort of travel in that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you think about it, the journey, Shane, like when you talked about earlier, when you asked me, what from, your roots in Porirua, how has that, and it goes right back to the upbringing in Porirua, it goes right back to community, it goes right back to associations and connections that I had in Porirua. It was so sad when I heard of when Rob passed away a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I remember I got the news, and I cried. I remember I was at the I cried because it's part of someone in your past, someone that you respect, someone that served the community. I was so proud to see after his football career that he was running programs in the community that he was serving. He was that thing that we have as Pacific Islanders. It's I don't know. We're just natural at serving. And to see him take on that mantle when he finished his career, it was so sad to hear. And condolences to the Piva family. One of the highlights of my little footy career was taking the field next to Robert Piva. Like it was just amazing. And which is more so with the health stuff, Shane, and to hell, it's just spreading that gospel of making good choices. We're not about looking like Arnold anymore. We're in our 50s now, so it's about maintaining muscle mass, eating, having a nutrition plan that you can sustain, and enjoying life. I don't buy into the narrative that the best years are behind us. You've heard it. Oh, the best years are behind us. It's downhill from here. If that's the case, what's the point of continuing? What's the point of moving forward? You've got to find something that's going to bring you joy and fulfillment, because you still got the last quarter of your life to live. So you've got to find something that's going to bring you joy. Find something that's going to get you up in the morning to be able to live. And for most of us that are in this age, it comes back to family, relationships. Because, I don't need to tell you the most important thing in life are our relationships. You don't take your possessions away. It's all about the relationship. And this last quarter of our life, if live a perfect, purposeful life, focus on the relationships that are close to you. And if you've got grandkids, be the example. Be the example.
You did, Jules. You definitely are. I think just some of the life lessons that you sort of shared with us, but also just you like you say, you've been that model of looking after yourself, and also being able to sort of navigate this period of our lives. Now we're sort of past, as I say, we all knew ourselves in a much younger version of ourselves, but it's also important at this particular stage of our lives in terms of those relationships actually are much more important, and particularly that connection from us from a long time ago. So I take on everything that that you've shared. This is really more of a motivation session you're providing, right? In terms of that work, but it definitely is important. That's why we were keen to talk, because I think there's, you know, we talked about our cohort and talked about, you know, what you know, so some of the things that we've sort of fallen into, which aren't sort of good habits or that, but like you say, it's not over, and there still is opportunity in terms of this next stage of our sort of lives and that as well. So Jules, just really inspirational in terms of the conversation and sort of Talanoa. You've sort of alluded to it in and out, but just as we sort of close, just you talked about your pieces of your own health journey. What's is there anything else you can sort of impart with us in wisdom in terms of just your own health journey?
Yeah, it's look, there's 168 hours in the week. How much are you prepared? What time are you prepared to put aside? Put aside for your health, right? 168 hours. 168 hours. So if you can put aside 8 hours a week, and you're on a plan of nutrition, and we're not talking about nutrition, Shane. It's not salads and man, it's focusing on protein, minimizing your sugar, and eating whole foods. You know, and that's all you got to do. It's and it's not about the scale. You know what I mean? It's not about constantly scale. It's going to come to a point. We're in our 50s. When you get into your 60s, getting into your 70s, little things like getting off the chair, little things like walking up a little flight of stairs, little things like carrying your shopping bags. Those little tasks that we think that we take for granted now, they're going to prove to be very difficult. So resistance training now to maintain the muscle mass that you have. It's great. And I see you, man. I see you on the books. I love what you guys are doing with Finley. Love what Latu Tokmanga is doing with community, those classes. Colin Webster down at the 24/7. Chris Te'o with the bike rides. Absolutely love that. I love that, that you can empower our people. People think, oh, do I need to do the hardcore training? No, of course not. The hit training, all that sort of stuff, I leave that to the guys in their 40s and 30s. You want to do it in your 50s, great. But here's the thing. That sort of training, as quick as you lose weight, you lose fat, you're also losing muscle mass. And we can't afford to lose muscle mass. So the best training for you is bike, resistance training in the gym. That's the best training. Okay? And and relationships, brother. Relationships is so important. And you know, to help, I remember you when you were a young guy. I used to think, silly, this guy is the rebel, man. Staunch rebel, out of all the Timotea brothers, he was the smallest guy, but I thought he was like, silly, this guy has got his chest out and so to see you on this podcast, doing what you're doing, man, I'm so proud of you. I really am. To see your journey as a man, from the little rebel, to see where you're at and your journey into. I'm proud of you, so I really am.
No, thanks, bro. No, I'm just blessed to even hear you, bro. We already had you teamed up, and we knew we wanted to hear you, especially your journey and your story and all the stuff that you've you've really encouraged me, bro. I mean, just hearing the stuff that I've heard tonight, man, amazing Talanoa, bro. I just probably wanted to ask you too, bro, any shout outs that you wanted to say or put on our platform, feel free, Shane, to put that all up, with the tournament going on and stuff like that. If you wanted to put it on our page as well, you feel free. We'll put it up in the links with the bro Shane.
Yeah, I probably don't have any shout outs for the Gold Coast, but just a shout out to our people there on you know, in Poriroa, you know, yourself and everyone that's working hard to serve and, you know, to make sure that the neighbor is well. And, you know, I just tip my hat off to, like I said, whenever I see the work that you guys are still doing in Poriroa and the people there like Finley, you know, I love it, man. I just, and we're getting older, but there's still a presence there, eh, Shane? We still got a little bit of a presence there in Poriroa.
Yeah, the joints still creak, but yeah, we're still there. Jules, look, really appreciate in terms of sort of the time with us and just fantastic in terms of just some of sharing your particular journey. You're definitely an example in terms of the proverb, ole ala I le pule o le tautua. You're definitely in terms of a lot of the wisdom and that you've got has been through sort of service and that as well. So, and you touched on it at the beginning, and I think you very much live out that sort of that Samoan proverb. So, na whaftaitele lava, Jules, really sort of congratulations on all your success, and particularly in terms of moving into a number of spaces where you've just sort of moved and evolved and developed. And just congratulations on the work you're doing with Coach Fit and this stage of your life. And yeah, well, I wish we could all look as sort of chiseled and
18 years old again.
yeah, we can live in hope. But so look, thanks, Jules. And as we sort of close out, really appreciate the time this evening. So far, tele lava.
So,
see everyone
thank you
next
very
time.
much, man. It's been a great chat. Loved it, and love your work. Keep up the great work, man. And hopefully talk to you guys again soon. Take care.
No, definitely love to have you back.
God bless, bro.
Thank you.